So there's a new COVID vaccine, and it's only been tested in mice, thus the ears. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Dr. David. Thought I'd lighten things up a little bit today with some fashion here. Yeah, we asked my staff members if anybody had any mouse ears, and this was the best we came up with. And I think it's lovely with purple and the sparkly, so it certainly adds to the mood of the day, I guess. But anyway, you've probably heard that about this new vaccine for COVID that's come out. It is true that they only did testing of this particular vaccine in mice. We will be getting to that in a little bit. Now, of course, people are wondering what my take is on the vaccine at this point. Now, this vaccine has half of the spike protein that is the original virus that we have been using for the vaccines that had covered for the Wuhan strain and for the deltas, etc. And then half of it now covers for Omicron strains BA.4 and BA.5. Now, it's actually only one new ingredient because the spike protein of BA.4 and BA.5 are actually the same. So they didn't have to make two different versions of it, which of course means if a person had BA.4 or BA.5, naturally they were actually covered for that and have antibodies for that as well. And again, we'll get into that a little later on as well. Now, of course, what does that mean if the vaccine was only tested in mice? One thing is for sure, humans are not mice. But of course, mice are one of the species that are commonly used in drugs testing when before given to humans. So it's obviously not outside the realm that it would be tested first in mice. But gee, wouldn't it be nice if they had actually tested it completely in humans beforehand? Now, it is certainly fair to raise this concern because there is, even though the other vaccines, such as the flu vaccine, and some people are counter arguing this question of why not human testing first. And yes, with flu vaccines, they do that every year. They don't keep on testing on humans. But I do want to point out that the flu vaccine has been around for many, many years. And there have been many, many variants and strains that have been used throughout the years. And so there is precedent that when they come up with the next flu vaccine, that they've done this enough times that they kind of know what they're getting. Now, with this, of course, messenger RNA, this is a brand new technology still. Hasn't really been used for anything besides COVID vaccine. So we actually do not know for sure if we change the spike protein around that's being made, if it will be okay. Now, so that's in addition to that, it should be known though that the drug manufacturers, they originally came up with this new booster to cover for BA.1. That was the original Omicron back in the winter time. Okay. Now, in England and in Canada and other places in Europe, they developed the vaccine and they decided to go with this one that had the BA.1 in it, which really doesn't make any sense because there is no more BA.1 around. There's no BA.2 around for that matter either, let alone Delta and Wuhan and all everything. It's all BA.4, BA.5. So at least in America, people will be getting vaccinated if they choose to do it, using a vaccine that's covering the strains that are going around right now and look to be around in the foreseeable future. Now, this BA.1 form was tested in humans. Okay. And there weren't any significant differences in terms of side effects noted compared to in the original vaccine. But of course, we do know that when the original vaccine, the clinical trials were done, we know that there was not a large enough sample size in order to identify the myocarditis, pericarditis, blood clots that came up not until millions and millions of people were given it. So obviously we don't know how this will be. Maybe it'll be more concerning and have more issues with that. Maybe it'll have less with those symptoms. Maybe it'll have something more, a completely new symptom. I think that would be less likely considering that there hasn't been that much of a change here, but still we just do not know. Now, it does make sense again if we are going to be vaccinating against something, at least make it relevant to what it's around. So again, I am very happy with that. But now the question is, will it work better? Okay. Now this is where the research that was done on humans with the BA.1, as well as the mice studies, do give us a pretty good hint. Okay, because number one, in the human studies, besides the fact that they didn't see any flags in terms of any worsening side effects, it did work. It made a significant boost in the antibody levels. And we of course know that even when that all the vaccines as well as past disease does seem to protect against more significant future disease, so that's good. But also the fact that in the mice studies themselves, mammals make antibodies no matter what we are mammal wise, right? So the fact that they did see a very robust increase in antibodies directed against the spike protein for BA.4 and BA.5, that's certainly a very good indicator that it probably will be giving protection against the vaccine. I mean, against the viruses that are now in circulation. Okay, so, of course, could there be another variant that will come down the line? There are no variants of concern, but I think we've been fooled enough time over the last 2.5 years to think that BA.4, BA.5 will be the last variants that we will see. But hey, so many people have caught this virus now. Herd immunity certainly is exceptionally better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, for sure. So we will see, and we talk about when will COVID become just a common cold like the other coronaviruses. At some point it'll happen, and maybe we're heading into that direction now anyway. Okay, for those people who choose to take the vaccine, who can take this new version? Okay, now only people who have had 2 doses at least of the original vaccine, whether they did or did not have a booster from the original vaccine, those are the only people eligible to take it. Now, one may say, hey, that's not fair. Hey, I want to have protection against BA.4, BA.5. But the reality is, let's face it, if you didn't take a vaccine against the original COVID strains, I can't imagine that there's many people who are going to be taking it now, especially since so many people have had COVID now, especially the fact that we are seeing a lot of evidence that the BA.4, BA.5 is not as severe as the previous versions, even though there was original concern about that back in the springtime, but that didn't really seem to play itself out. So the fact that there's people, and that they're focusing on the booster, but also because of the fact that it is a smaller dose than the original vaccines, and therefore as a booster, there is no research that shows that if you just start with this lower dose as a booster, that it'll actually do anything. So that is the reason why they're requiring people to get this booster. And again, when you put two and two together for those things, I guess it kind of does make sense. Okay, now in addition to that, the Pfizer version is allowed for people over 12 years of age. The Moderna for people over 18. That's kind of like they did for the pediatric and older kids in the first place versus the adults. So there's not too much that's different there. But a person does need to wait at least 2 months from when they had their last vaccine, whichever one the vaccine was. There needs to be at least 2 months before they can get this new updated booster shot. The CDC is recommending waiting at least 3 months, or suggesting is the word, at least 3 months after having wild COVID before doing the booster. Okay, well, that's interesting. At least they're acknowledging that that there is wild natural immunity, herd immunity. That's a good thing. And it's interesting to note that they are telling people that they can wait longer when they have natural immunity versus the vaccines. That may be a little telling you what, even though there hasn't been this great outpouring of love from the CDC for natural immunity, of course, the reality is that it's there. And even if when we saw the recommendations in terms of the masking and in terms of everything else that has changed and the social distancing from earlier this summer, that's at least a tacit acknowledgement that they realize we're into this herd immunity less severe stage. Now, here's the question that everybody's asking. Should I get the new booster? Now, before I do that, I do want to invite everybody out there who has not subscribed already to please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the notification button so you know when we release new episodes. Share it with your friends. Please spread the word. We love to see that. We want to make this message grow. So back to our question. Should I take it? Now, as with everything else I've ever talked about regarding the COVID vaccines and with all other treatments, this is an individual decision, and a person should weigh the potential benefits and the potential risks before making their decision. That is what informed consent is all about. Okay? But there are some things to take into consideration. Now, if it were me, as I had made recommendations for the prior vaccines, I would be waiting at least 4 to 6 weeks to see that there aren't any unintended consequences, things that we don't know about that comes out. But I think that if by 4 to 6 weeks, if we haven't heard of anything catastrophic, unexpected, I think that if you're choosing to do the vaccine, you're probably in a good place at that time to realize that you're not at any more risk than if you were to get the booster of the original form. Okay. Um, Now, if you are somebody who has been so fearful of BA.4, BA.5 really BA.5 because that's what's around now, that you're not willing to leave the house, be social, do anything. And the only way that you would be comfortable doing it if you had a previous vaccine and you were good with going out for a while, but now you're not, go ahead, get the vaccine once you're comfortable doing it. If that's going to make your life better, if that's going to make you more comfortable, more social, more fulfilled in life, absolutely 100% you should do that. Now, if you are a person who had COVID this summer, there is such an incredibly high chance that you had BA.4 or BA.5 that realistically you've been boosted against those spike proteins. So is it possible that you had a lingering BA.2 if it was like in June? It's certainly possible, but again, recognizing that that would be true relative to people who didn't have the disease at all and just had older versions of the vaccine. But we also know that if a person has had Omicron variant, that it would be really unlikely that they would get more sick this time if they were to catch these versions of it, because Omicron's still Omicron. You still have antibodies, you still have B and T cell memory. So again, weighing those pros and cons in terms of how likely are you at risk. Of course, is there somebody you're around who may be at risk? Of course, that may change the calculus for you as well. Now, um, of course, while we know that antibody levels have faded over time, so the more recently that you've had COVID, or for that matter, more recently you've had a vaccine, you have higher antibody levels in circulation because we have seen that these antibodies do fade over time. As you may know, I did check my antibody levels all along the way when I did choose to get vaccinated. Before I actually caught COVID back at the end of June, my antibody levels clearly had dropped. And then once I caught COVID, my antibody levels are now so high they can't even measure. It's too high. It hits the upper end of the reporting limits. So, we used to talk about the 2,500 club. Now it's been advanced to the 25,000 club, especially if run through LabCorp. So people can, of course, still be checking antibodies. And if you had a recent infection and your antibodies are through the roof, then you probably aren't going to get that much benefit from one of these, from a booster now. Now, of course, we still don't have any understanding about B and T cell memory cells and what role that can be playing, but we know that it is significant. I also do want to point out that compared to earlier in the pandemic, we do have a successful treatment that's been well studied now in Paxlovid. I did take it myself, did not progress into anything. Lots of people I know who took it can have a nasty aftertaste and some weird dry mouth stuff going on with it, but it is effective. So the point being also, we do have much more effective ways of treating COVID that we did before, and that should be an important part of the overall risk to benefit ratio. So there you go. If your benefit weighs out the risk, then of course I would support anybody's decision who comes to that conclusion. If a person feels that that's not where they want to be, of course I support their decision as well. So I hope you found this helpful, that maybe you picked a thing up or two. And of course, any comments, please leave them in the comment section below. We try to answer questions as they come up. And have a great day. Bye-bye. If you like what you've been seeing, please hit the subscribe button.